All right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In, a college coach conversation. In this final segment, I'm joined by Aysha Wong, who is on the literal other end of the country from me, the opposite corner. Aysha from Florida, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me, Ian.
Glad to have you here. We are going to talk about your alma mater and your former employer, the University of Florida in Gainesville. Um, First of all, what comes to mind when you think of the University of Florida? Like, what is the sort of strongest characteristic that comes through for you?
Yeah, for me, I think of like spirit. So immediately I'm thinking of like an overall like enthusiasm and spirit and energy that comes through with the campus. I think, with their athletic teams and with this sense of community that you get as being a Gator,
Mhm.
that's all very much tied into this like intense passion for the university. And you can feel that energy when you're on campus too. And that was my experience as a student and my experience as an employee there, as a staff member. And still being in Gainesville, still my experience in some ways. So yeah, definitely energy and spirit for sure.
It's great. When I hear University of Florida, I can see the colors blue and orange in my head. And
Hmm.
it's just like it comes through so strongly. And so it totally makes sense that spirit would be the thing that you would lead with. You were a student, then you moved over to the admission office. How do you look for spirit in an application to University of Florida? Is that something you're looking for? What are the other kind of salient factors that really are important as a part of application review?
Yeah, definitely. I think spirit is hard to capture in an application. I mean, students, can show their enthusiasm for institutions, I feel like in a multitude of ways. But the questioning, I think, in the UF application, as far as like essay writing and things like that, aren't necessarily designed specifically to capture spirit. So I
Mm.
think a student does have to be really thoughtful and intentional about how they display themselves in their application for UF. I think what it comes down to is kind of uh, displaying that personality through their personal voice in their
Hmm.
writing, having enthusiasm about the things that they're involved in their life in the here and now. Are you passionate about this activity that you are pursuing? Are you intensely involving yourself in exploring your academic interests? Like, how is that passion, that intensity reading through the way that you live your life now?
Mm.
And so I think that's kind of where we can pick up on how they might bring that into the campus environment, and add to that overall spirit that they have on the University of Florida campus.
You think about Florida and you think about, Saturday ESPN football game and you kind of scan this crowd and everybody's doing, the Gator chomp, right? It's this sea
Yeah.
of faces. There are so many people there. There are also tens of thousands of applications that come through UF every year. And you can probably tell me about how many in total. Um, how do you stand out in a crowd, a literal crowd, with the materials that are provided for you, especially at a big university like Florida with such a deep applicant pool?
Yeah, it is tough. Um, every now and then you find, I think when I was reading applications, I would find like this spark
Hmm.
in an applicant that just made me stop in my tracks and be like, wow, I want to save this. I want to capture this. I want to bottle it in some way. And often that's a student that, is showcasing a great sense of self, right? Like an understanding of who they are and that somehow is coming through in their writing. And again, that intensity, I think, plays into it as well. Like they're not just aware of who they are, but they're actively seeking ways to grow that and explore that. Um, and so that's coming through, oftentimes in their writing, in the essays. We're getting the main common app essay, they're getting the supplemental essay about their most meaningful activity. And so you're able to see some of that passion and exploration come through. Um, but I think also there are certain things that you can specifically look for when you're thinking about this very large campus with this great set of opportunities, like a wealth of opportunities. And you know that a student is going to need to be a self-starter. You know that they're going to have a certain degree of independence and maturity to navigate such a vast campus.
Yeah.
and so many different opportunities. So you look for those sorts of things as well. Like that was something that was important to me when I was reading was, am I seeing someone that I believe will ask for help when they need help, will actively seek out the opportunities versus waiting on those things to kind of present themselves to the student. So taking initiative, being a self-starter, those qualities I think are especially important to be, showcased in this application.
Probably also characteristics that other public universities of similar size are looking for, because they are large, because you need to go find those opportunities. You talked
Yeah.
about, students that are asking for help. That was something that at Reed, when we were looking at applications, was also very important to us, but we weren't looking for that same sense of going out and advocating for yourself and finding those opportunities. Because in many ways at a small school, those find you. They are
Right.
opportunities that, your professor will ask you if you missed class, because there are only
Mm-hmm.
15 people in the class, and that's not going to
Yep.
happen in a larger university. So
Absolutely.
there are very important kind of distinctions in terms of the student characteristics that will come through that make you a fit for a university like Florida. Even though it feels like it's big, they're still looking for match.
Yep.
Now, Aysha, you have a gift of being both efficient and thorough simultaneously. How much time did you spend per application? I imagine you had many that you had to get through, and folks might think there's no way that she could possibly have read all the stuff that she read, but I know that you can because I know you. But what did the pragmatics look like at UF?
Yeah. Yeah. You do have fairly limited time. I mean, I would say probably 5 to 7 minutes max on an application. Um, the review is split up into multiple phases and parts. So that's
Mm-hmm.
just generally for like the writing and the resume and those like sort of like non-academic pieces specifically. And then we would do other additional reviews. So there's like layers to this that I think are helpful in kind of breaking up the work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a relatively quick review. You learn to be a fast reader. That's one skill you pick up, I think, as an admissions counselor who reads applications. You learn how to zero in on the things that are going to be meaningful or important in your decision making. So that's happening as well. But yeah, the time is definitely limited. So students should be thoughtful about, how they organize their information, how they display that within the application,
Yeah.
um, to ensure that, admissions counselors are picking up on what they want them to pick up very quickly.
And simplify. You don't want your admission counselor to have to work to figure out what you're trying to
Yes,
say. You don't want them kind of poring over very complex sentences. Simplify, right? Make sure that
absolutely.
your message is clear.
Yeah, and we're not going to stop and Google what something is. We're not going to try to figure out what an acronym means
Mm-hmm.
or what this obscure engineering concept is that you're talking about in your essay. So yes, simplifying is key.
Definitely. Now, you said that there's not a lot of time in Florida
Mhm.
to apply to University of Florida. There's actually not a lot of time. I think it's got the earliest regular decision deadline of any school that I've seen,
Yeah.
November 1st, right? That you
Yep.
have to apply by the 1st. What's the deal with that? That's so
Yeah.
early. What's going on?
Yeah, it's early for a reason. I mean, we're getting decisions out, or you say we're, but we are, but UF is getting decisions out by mid-February,
Mm-hmm.
typically mid to late February. And so there's this window of time to get all of this review done. And because the review is designed to be holistic and you want to be able to kind of in some ways have some time to kind of understand who this person is and look at them thoroughly. You have to have an earlier deadline if you're dealing with 50, 60,000
Yeah,
applications coming in. So it's simply volume, staffing, trying to make sure that, they have time to kind of look at things thoroughly as they go through the process. So yeah, it's an early deadline. So we just have the time to get the work done,
got to do it.
essentially. Yeah,
So if UF is on your list or you think UF is on your list, it is probably the first application that you want to complete, because even early action deadlines that are November 1st, you have that fallback of the regular decision if you can't make that deadline. But UF, it's November 1. If you don't make it, you don't make it, and you're not going to be applying. Um,
absolutely.
there's
Yeah.
also a couple of other unique quirks to UF. They have continued to require testing. They required it even through the pandemic. And then they also require the
SAR, yes.
SRAR, the self-reported academic record. For
Yes.
those of us who are unfamiliar with those, let's start with testing. Why does Florida require testing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a complicated question with a complicated answer. But I mean, they never stopped requiring testing. All through the pandemic, they maintained requiring testing. And I think part of that was due to the fact that we have the Florida Bright Future Scholarship here in Florida. And one of the things that you need to meet in order to qualify for that scholarship is a certain test score. And so I think they didn't want to let go of that requirement, that data point in their consideration of students for scholarships. And so, universities had to essentially continue to require it to encourage students to take those tests and submit those tests for that scholarship consideration. So I think that definitely played into some of that decision making around keeping test scores as a requirement. And beyond that, it's hard for me to say what the logic is.
I don't need you to pontificate on that. And then the SRAR, what's going on there? You've got only 30 seconds to explain this very complex form.
Yes. You're asking students to go ahead and report their record in the same way as it appears on their transcript. And this is also based in efficiency as well. Previously, they were collecting actual transcripts and we were hand recalculating those GPAs because all of the transcripts formats were different. There was no standard. And so this helped increase the efficiency when you're, again, seeing such a large increase in applications year over year, and allowing, more focus on the actual review and less on processing.
Awesome. Aysha, how long have you been with College Coach?
2 years.
2 years now.
Well, not 2 years. Oh, a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Specific.
Folks, Aysha is awesome. She's awesome. So we look forward to having you more on the radio show and everywhere else that you can share your expertise with folks. Really, really
Absolutely.
a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Glad to have you. All right. Next week, we will be back. We'll be talking about the supplemental essay. What is it? We'll also do a deep dive on the activity list, which is a really important part of the application that is often overlooked. And you might be wondering, why can't I fill out the FAFSA? We'll talk a little bit about the FAFSA changes and why it's delaying the opportunity to apply for financial aid. In the meantime, we hope that you have a wonderful start to October. Take care of each other, and we'll see you all through the fall.